Way back in the early days of the New Jedi Order project, James Luceno had no idea that he would end up writing the final volume of the series. But as an integral part of the NJO planning group, he created the series Bible and worked with the editors to shape the direction of the series. He became the default choice to wrap up this 19-book arc. But wrapping it up was easier said than done. In a 2003 interview, Luceno shared that after he turned in his first draft of the Unifying Force, he received a 3-page list of plot threads that still needed to be wrapped up. The Unifying Force made it to number 10 on the New York Times bestseller list for the week of November 23rd, 2003. It was ultimately on the list for 2 weeks. I remembered a fair bit of the last third of the Unifying Force, but not so much everything that led up to that final section. So, a brief summary. The Galactic Alliance's success against the Yuuzhan Vong invasion has proven all too brief, and the enemy now has the advantage against the Alliance once more. As Han and Leia rush to save hundreds of Alliance prisoners of war who face slaughter on the former capital of Coruscant, Luke and his team are stuck on the living world of Zonama Sekot as it hurtles through hyperspace. But as wave after wave of enemy forces arrive to attack the Alliance's stronghold on Mon Calamari, the United Alliance and Imperial forces make one last attempt to retake Coruscant. If the last few books felt a lot more limited in focus in that we had less characters and a select number of subplots, the Unifying Force has a lot going on, but that makes sense because this is the series ender. This has to somehow wrap up everything that came before. There aren't a lot of quiet moments or moments of character development, but to be fair, a lot of that character development has happened in the previous 18 books of the series, so don't look for that here. It's pretty much non-stop action from start to finish, and there's very few chances for it to slow down and for characters to think and reflect. After Nom Anor sabotaged Zonama Sekot's hyperdrives at the end of the final prophecy, the living planet with Luke and the other Jedi on board has been intermittently hurtling through hyperspace, coming out in various systems, reassessing, and then entering hyperspace again. Tahiri and Tekli find that Harar, the Yuuzhan Vong priest, did survive being thrown off a cliff near the end of the final prophecy, and he becomes another voice to urge Zonama Sekot to enter known space again and pick a side against the Yuuzhan Vong. So the battles go as follows. We have Han and Leia trying to pick up the information from Selvaris, and then all the forces returning to Selvaris, or some of the forces, it was like Wedge's forces, to save the prisoners. Then Han and Leia on Kalula as the Yuuzhan Vong are attacking, and then the Yuuzhan Vong attacking Mon Calamari, and then Han and Leia going back to Kalula to take down the Yammisk, and then the Yuuzhan Vong going from Mon Calamari back to Coruscant because Zonama Sekot has appeared in the night sky. And then sort of like a short détente where no one's attacking anyone for a little bit because the Galactic Alliance is trying to figure out what they want to do next, and the Yuuzhan Vong are just not sure what to do with Zonama Sekot at all. And then the final battle, which is like a good third of the end of the book, in which the Galactic Alliance attacks Coruscant, and Shimrra sends the poisoned Alpha Red ship to Zonama Sekot. So there's a lot of action here, a lot of ships flying around, people dying, yada yada yada. And we're told at the very end that over the whole span of this war, 376 trillion people have died. And 5 million people alone died in this final assault on Coruscant. But all the people dying are not really anyone we know. We have all these starfighters, and some people are called by their names, so we know Wes Jansen and Gavin Darklighter and such are out there. And a lot of people die, but the ones dying we only know by their call sign, so it doesn't have the same feeling that some of the other battles have where people are dying and you know them. Here, it's like a lot of collateral damage, and when you add it up in your head, you go, yeah, there's a lot of people dying here. But since I don't personally know any of the characters, it's not the same feeling that Vector Prime or Star by Star gives you. But then again, this is the triumphant end, and they may have lost a lot of people along the way, but they're finally able to vanquish the Yuuzhan Vong threat. So I'm guessing they probably didn't want to throw a major character death into the last book just to spice things up, because that's not what this book is here for. Han and Leia are very, very busy running different missions for the Galactic Alliance. I felt at times like Han and Leia were behaving a little recklessly. They were jumping from action to action to action, in particular when they were part of the insertion team on Kalula to destroy the Yammisk. Han really should have died. He got bitten by an amphistaff, and there's a perfectly logical reason why he's okay, but I felt like that was the moment where I thought that Han especially was behaving with reckless disregard for his own life, and it shocked me a little. Boba Fett shows up for a whole 5 pages, fights the Yuuzhan Vong like everyone else, and tells Han that, it was just business, his vendetta against him, and really he's always had it out for the Jedi. This is interesting. This is definitely a development that would not have happened were it not for the release of Attack of the Clones in 2002, because prior to that point, Boba Fett's backstory was very, very different. He was a bit of a weirdo. He was a definite loner. He didn't really have a connection to Mandalorian culture or Mandalorian history at all, other than the armor that he wore. But now, with the film letting us know that he's a clone of the bounty hunter Jango Fett, his father was killed by the Jedi, means that future books, even though they're set after the previous stories with Boba Fett that set him up to be that weird loner, will sort of retcon him a bit to bring him more in line with what we learned in the prequel trilogy. And even though he only appears in a few very brief pages, he makes an appearance on the Japanese cover of the Unifying Force, because I guess if you're gonna throw Boba Fett into the story, you really need to market it that way. A lot of the Jedi have been given ships by Zonama Sekot, ships that, like in Rogue Planet, have bonded with them and are living very much like the Yuuzhan Vong ships. Kype's in one, Corran's in one, pretty much everyone ends up with one. They find it hard to get their ship to fire on the Yuuzhan Vong, but they have to learn to work with the ship. Except it ends up, I don't know, that wasn't even really necessary, because Zonama Sekot itself is able to take out the Alpha Red ship threat without using any of them. So if they're there, there's some more Jedi that are sent to Coruscant, and they break off into various groups. We have Tahiri and Kent Hamner and Mara Jade, who are sent one place, and they happen to be in the right place at the right time to encounter Nom Anor. Going into this, I was really expecting this to be a fight, Mara versus Nom Anor, and Mara being able to get some, not vengeance, but work through all the bad stuff that Nom Anor has done to her. And it was a fight, but it was a very one-sided fight, because Mara pretty much just beats the crap out of Nom Anor. And when she gets to the part where she could kill him, she realizes that no, that's not what a Jedi would do, and he could be far more used to them elsewhere, which I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed subverting that image everyone has of Mara as the cold-blooded assassin, her being able to step back from a situation and say, wait a minute, yeah, I really hate this guy, and he's absolute garbage, but he's useful, so I'll save him for now. Another group of Jedi head towards Shimrra's citadel, and Jaina and Jacen and Luke ascend to the top of the citadel to confront Shimrra himself. Jaina felt not useless, but not as well utilized as Luke and Jacen here. Obviously, the three of them fight against Shimrra's Slayers, this new brand of warrior that's been cooked up by the Shapers. And there's lots of fighting, and it's hard, but they take care of them all. And then she's the one that notices something funny with Onimi and takes off after him. While Luke and Jacen face off against Shimrra, Luke is able to kill Shimrra, but at the cost of being poisoned by the Supreme Overlord's amphistaff. Onimi, meanwhile, got the drop on Jaina, knocked her out. She comes to and she's just like hanging there on the ship as he villain monologues at her. And then Jacen appears and he villain monologues at Jacen. And then they have a standoff, which is less a physical fight and more Jacen opening himself to the Force and becoming so strong and so full of light and power that he overpowers Onimi, and Onimi basically just like dissolves into a puddle of venomous goo. It sounds silly when you relate it, but I actually really liked this section. I liked Jacen realizing that while he'd been scared of taking action all along, what the Force wanted from him was to literally stand firm, to be the weapon, to open himself fully to that potential and allow himself to be used like that he would experience something he would never be able to experience again, and that he would probably be chasing the rest of his life. Luke has always been a physical person. He jumps in his X-Wing and destroys the Death Star. He duels with his father. And Jacen's been a more cerebral one, so it worked really well for me that Luke's big battle was dueling Shimrra, and even there, he gives himself up fully to the Force, and Jaina and Jacen think that he's fighting like he's never fought before. Whereas Jacen is giving himself fully up to the Force and standing firm, and no weapon is necessary because Jacen himself is the weapon. With such two strong, I guess, stands on the part of Luke and Jacen, I was disappointed by Jaina because she pretty much exists just to get Jacen in the right place at the right time. But that feels like a lot of Jaina's plot lines at times, that Jaina's just there. Jaina's a needed body, but Jaina doesn't always have a pivotal role to play like some of the other characters. But what about Nom Anor, you may be asking? Nom Anor was helping the Jedi, not because he wanted to, because he was being forced to. What happens to him in the end? Well, in a very Nom Anor-like move, Nom Anor chooses his own death. He tries to betray them at the end when they're getting off Shimrra's Citadel escape pod by leading them not into the actual escape pod, but into the garbage. And when they figure out that he's tricked them, he's just like, yeah, I want to die. I don't want to live through any of this, and bye. And that felt like a very fitting end to him, exactly what he would have chosen. He doesn't want to die in battle, and he wants everything to be on his terms, even when it is his own death. And finally, we learn the truth behind Supreme Overlord Shimrra, we learn more of the Yuuzhan Vong's history, and we learn exactly what role Zonama Sekot has to play in this situation. We learn that the reason the Vong are so vehemently opposed to technology is because in their very far past, they were attacked by a technological mechanical race. I believe that future reference material will say that this was a droid species, and specifically, this was the droid species that appeared in the Lando Calrissian adventures, because, you know, if they're gonna throw out a reference of extra galactic droids, maybe they're from the same system. The Yuuzhan Vong's homeworld of Yuuzhan Tar gave them the ability to convert the things around them into weapons, and after they defeated that technological race, the Yuuzhan Vong just went on a conquering, destructive spree, pretty much wiping out everything else in their galaxy. At which point, we learn the secret behind why the Jedi can't sense them in the Force, why they're just voids. Like Callista in the books by Barbara Hambly and Kevin J. Anderson, and like Ulic Qel-Droma in the Tales of the Jedi comic series, the Yuuzhan Vong have been stripped of the Force. I wish when we got this revelation that Luke or someone else had been like, oh yes, we have encountered that before, because we have with those two characters, one that our heroes live through and one that's a tale of the Jedi, a legend at this point. But it is a logical explanation for why the Jedi haven't been able to sense them and why they seem to be outside of the Force, because as an entire species, they've been stripped of it. Their homeworld was presumably destroyed, and their anger over being stripped of their Force sense seems that they created their gods in an attempt to explain what they were lacking and what was gone, and that their weird masochistic culture has evolved out of this essential lack they feel. And the reason that Zonama Sekot is so familiar to the Yuuzhan Vong is because it's a seed of their homeworld that, I guess, as their homeworld was dying, it made a baby, and this baby entered the Star Wars galaxy and at some point gained sentience and is Zonama Sekot. I guess I'm a little confused how the seed of a planet can go from one galaxy to another, but you know, it works. It's a good explanation to wrap up the mystery that's been Zonama Sekot for several of these books now. And Shimrra's a big dude, mainly because the Shapers made him that way, but also because he was being manipulated by someone else. His weird telepathic skills aren't his. Someone was using him to get what they wanted. And the person using him was Onimi, the shamed one jester. This is another one where I sort of wish we'd gotten a little bit more of this in advance. We didn't really see much of Shimrra until Destiny's Way by Walter John Williams. We did get a hint at the end of that something was wrong with him, that something was not right. And Onimi we've seen since Edge of Victory Rebirth by Greg Keyes. We know that he's able to disguise himself to be something that he's not. We learn here that he was a shaper who experimented on himself, added Yamisk cells to his neural pathways or something, and it made him a shamed one, but it also essentially gave him back his Force ability. He can telepathically manipulate people, and he's been doing it ever since. But like Shimrra, we haven't really gotten a sense of all that Onimi could be capable of, because it's the same thing. We haven't seen a lot of him other than Rebirth, where he's playing a role, and then when he enters with Shimrra in Destiny's Way, and he's obviously underestimated by the people around him, but these revelations about Onimi come through the form of a cackling, villainous monologue he delivers to Jaina and then to Jason at the end. Which is fine, I guess. If you're crazy, maybe that's how you go about things, that you just monologue at people in an evil way. And it worked. I just wanted a little bit more. So, do I think that the Unifying Force wraps up the New Jedi Order series? Yes, it wraps it up really well. I don't really see how you could have ended it other than the way that Luceno ended it, because everything is logical, everything makes sense. There's bits that I quibble with, but it all works. But at the same time, you know me, I'm gonna have to nitpick Luceno's writing a bit. And instead of focusing on his big thesaurus words this time, I'm gonna focus on how much he loves to just throw a list of characters out there, just a really long list. They'll be at a briefing, and he just delivers us this long, lengthy list of all the important officers who are there. And it's like, cool, do I need to know that they're all here? Just say all the Alliance head officials are here, maybe call out a few by name, but you don't have to list 10 of them. And that happens a lot. Instead of saying some of the Jedi were chosen to receive Zonama Sekotan ships, we get a list where it's like every single one of them. And we hear Kype Durn and Corran Horn and Kyle Katarn and blah, 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 and blah, 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 blah. And like, I don't care. I don't care what Octa Ramis does. She's not important to me. He'd also go out his way to describe people in a way that I felt was sometimes unnecessary. At this point, I know that Saba Sabatine is a female Barabel. You don't have to tell me. Or there was a really awkward bit where Nom Anor sees Mara and Tahiri and Kenneth Hamner fighting with all the other Shamed Ones and Galactic Alliance troops fighting. And Mara is described as the red gold-haired Skywalker. And look, I appreciate when authors get her hair color right. Don't say auburn, but say red gold. But there's a difference between you're meeting Mara for the first time in a book, and she's described as a slim, graceful woman with red gold hair and gleaming green eyes. And then we've seen Mara multiple points at this time, and if you really want to reiterate what she looks like, just say red-haired woman, because red gold-haired is just really awkward. Do I also wish that some of the revelations here had been maybe a little more hinted at in previous books? Yeah, I do, but I can't really fault Luceno here, and I can't really fault the authors that came before, because as I've seen in interviews from at the time, this was an absolute madhouse to work through. People are turning in books late, people are turning in books at the same time, they're trying to keep continuity, but there's so much going on and so many books are being released in such a short time that, yeah, it's hard to keep things balanced and even straight at times. Plot elements like droid sentience and droid independence got dropped after the Agents of Chaos duology because they realized they needed to focus on Anakin. They desperately needed to focus on Anakin before Star by Star. So there's obviously going to be messy things in the new Jedi Order that just don't sync up well because of the way in which it was written and the short time span. These books came out from 1999 to 2003. That is not very much time at all. So in short, if I were to rank the Unifying Force, it would not be in my top tier of books. Definitely in my top tier, I would have Edge of Victory, Conquest, and Traitor. But I think it did a really good job of wrapping up the series, and wrapping up the series in a way that felt logical and natural. Our heroes were never going to condone genocide, but at the same time, the Yuuzhan Vong won't stop. So I think that everything that happened in this book brought the Yuuzhan Vong arc to a satisfactory conclusion. They're reunited with their ancestral home. They'll hopefully be rethinking their culture and their attitude towards the rest of life. Some of the Jedi are heading off with Zonama Sekot, and maybe one of them, like Danny Kui, will become the interface between Zonama Sekot, the intelligence, and Zonama Sekot, the planet, once Jabbatha is done. So as the book ends, Jaina and Jag have broken up for now. Jacen wants to go off on a journey of self-discovery. The Galactic Alliance has a lot of rebuilding to do. Luke is healed, he and Mara are reunited with their son, and Han and Leia might be taking a nice trip around to Han's old jaunts. We'll revisit them eventually in the Dark Nest trilogy. But next, I think I'm going to go back and reread some of the short stories and novellas and comics that either came out during the New Jedi Order or afterwards that add a little bit more to the story. So next time, I'm going to be reading a short story from Star Wars Gamer issue 7 that's set after Vision of the Future, but before Vector Prime. Red Sky, Blue Flame by Elaine Cunningham.